Hey guys, it's Mrs. Willoughby again. Hoping that you're still continuing to do well. We are just a few weeks shy of being done with this official school year, and so just a few more videos that you'll have from me, but know that you can always contact me no matter what, even if I'm your current teacher or not. So today we are going to learn about figurative language and how we can use that to help us better understand what we're reading. So let's get to it. So figurative language is what we're focusing on today, and our learning target today is I can determine the meaning of non-literal language. So that means figurative language. Here we go. So what is figurative language? Figurative language, sometimes called figures of speech, are words or phrases that mean something different than individual words might on their own. So they don't always mean what they seem. You have to kind of dig deeper and think a little bit more about what the words mean. We can't take them for face value for exactly what they say. So why do writers use figurative language? Not to make it more confusing, but usually they use it just to make their writing more interesting and descriptive or dramatic. Figurative language also helps the writer create imagery, so it helps us make a picture in our mind as we're reading the story or visualizing what they're talking about. Instead of just using plain words, they kind of help us imagine it in our minds, which makes it a little bit more interesting for the reader. So there are 7 types of figurative language that we're going to talk about today. There's really lots and lots of different kinds of figurative language, and we could probably spend weeks on the different types of figurative language, but today our purpose is just to expose you to these different types of figurative language, and really just so that you can get an idea of what they are and recognize them when you are reading. So each of them has their own characteristics, and we're going to go over them just shortly, again, just to give you kind of a quick overview. So the 7 are alliteration, hyperbole, idiom, onomatopoeia, personification, metaphors, and similes. You may have heard of some of them before, and even when we get into a little bit more detail about each of those, you'll probably go, oh yeah, I've heard something like that before, and maybe you just didn't have a name for it. So let's dig in. Alliteration is one that I know I've mentioned before, and it's one of my favorite ways to write or things to read. But alliteration is the repetition of the first letter or sound of each word in a sentence, phrase, or poem. So here's an example. Dinosaurs desperately dug ditches to drive away dangerous dragons. So alliteration has all or almost all of the words in the sentence or phrase that are the same or begin the same. You'll notice there's words like to, there's away in this one to help the words form meaning, but most of the words that I used in that example started with the letter D or the D sound. Let's look at another example. Voracious volcanoes vibrated the valley violently. So again, it helps me have kind of a picture of what that looked like, and it's just kind of fun to say. Alliteration is a really fun one to read. Dr. Seuss uses alliteration a lot when you read his books. They just kind of make it fun. Another example of figurative language is a hyperbole. And hyperbole is a figure of speech that includes an exaggeration which couldn't possibly happen in real life. And this is one that you probably use a lot or hear a lot, and you just didn't know that it's called a hyperbole. So here's an example. I might say that we waited 1,000,000 years for our food. Now, if I'm thinking about this, I didn't really wait 1,000,000 years because that couldn't happen, right? If I waited 1,000,000 years, I'm not going to be around anymore, and you're not going to be around anymore. Things would be completely different. So I wouldn't really wait 1,000,000 years. So what does this really mean? It means that we waited a long time for our food. It felt maybe like 1,000,000 years. It felt like a really, really long time, but it wasn't actually 1,000,000 years. Why don't you try this next one and think about what that means? So this backpack weighs a ton. So think to yourself, what does that really mean? Is it really a ton? A ton is like how much an elephant weighs. So it doesn't really weigh a ton, but what does it really mean? It just means that the backpack was really heavy. I know that a ton is a lot of weight, and so it feels like this backpack's really heavy. Yours might feel heavy sometimes when you have lots of homework or lots of things to take with you. Idiom is another form of, there's Bailey joining us, form of figurative language. So idioms are expressions that mean something other than the words in the phrase might indicate. So, for example, it's raining cats and dogs. Really, that expression has nothing to do with cats and dogs. And so I have to really think about what that might mean. I have to pick apart that one a little bit. So raining cats and dogs, I'm thinking if it's raining as much as a whole cat and a dog coming down or multiple cats and dogs, that just means that it's raining a lot. It's raining really hard. It's not actually raining down cats and dogs. That would be really crazy, right? Let's look at another example and see if you can think about it. So I studied for the test, so it was a piece of cake. So pause the video if you need to. Think about what that really means. The test that you took really wasn't a piece of cake. Like you didn't have an actual piece of cake that you're eating for your test. That would be an awesome test. And I would do that every day. I would love to have that test. So what does that really mean? So really, that means that it was really easy. So some of these idioms are shortened a little bit when we use them every day. So this one, you kind of have to imply that I studied for the test, so the test was as easy as eating a piece of cake. Eating a piece of cake is something that's really easy to do, unless you hate cake, which I don't know many people that hate cake. But eating cake is a really easy thing to do. And so that test was really easy because you studied hard. Onomatopoeia is another one, and it's a word that comes from a sound. This is another one that you probably already know. You just maybe don't know that it's called an onomatopoeia. So things like honk, splat, kaboom, pop, oink. So any word that you're like writing out or spelling out a sound that's happening is an onomatopoeia. And so sometimes we add those in our writing so that it makes it a little bit more interesting, and we know exactly, like if you tell me that it had a honk, I can hear that in my head even though I don't have the actual sound. So it helps me kind of picture that or remember what that might sound like. Do you have any other onomatopoeias you might think of? One more that we'll go over is personification. And that's the act of giving human characteristics or qualities and actions to objects or animals. Again, this is another one that's pretty familiar probably to you. You just didn't know that maybe it's called personification. And it really just paints a better picture for readers. So, for example, the stars are smiling and winking at us. Well, the stars aren't really having a face and smiling and winking, but I might see that it's shining and it kind of makes me think of like, oh, maybe it's smiling at me or it's winking. They make me kind of have this good feeling. Or I might say the trees danced in the breeze. Well, knowing what I know about trees, they aren't really going to dance. They aren't things that can make themselves move. They are living, but they aren't able to move themselves. But if I think about if I was dancing in the breeze and moving around, and I'm watching those branches and leaves, it might look as though they're dancing and moving around because the breeze is making them kind of flow in a way that looks like they're dancing. So that was really quick of that one. We have one more. So metaphors is a figure of speech that says one thing is the same as something else. So an example of this would be like Ava was a busy bee. So it doesn't mean that Ava was actually a bee. I just know that that means that she is always on the go. Bees are constantly moving and doing something and really busy, so she's also really busy. Let's look at another one. You are my sunshine. So think about what that might mean if I say, oh, you are my sunshine. You're not really the sun. You're not giving off light and heat, but you do make me happy. Like the sun is something that when it's shining, you feel good, you feel happy, it makes people feel good. And so if you are my sunshine, you just put off a good energy and you make people happy. The next one we have is similes. A simile is a type of metaphor where two things are compared using the word like or as. So these are very similar to metaphors, but they include the words like or as. And these are, you'll see similes a lot in like some of the standardized tests that we take. They'll do a lot of them where they're comparing different things with like or as, and you kind of have to figure out what the comparison is. So let's think about this one. Bob was as hungry as a bear. So he's not really a bear, but that means that he was really, really hungry, because I think about bears when they're ready to go into hibernation. They eat a lot before they hibernate, because they won't eat for several months as they're sleeping through the winter. So if you're hungry as a bear, that means you're really, really hungry. You're ready to eat a lot. Why don't you try this one? My best friend sings like an angel. So that one, your friend's not really an angel, but if I think about what an angel might sound like, I would imagine that an angel has a really beautiful, pretty voice. And so this simile would mean that she just sings beautifully, has a really nice singing voice. So again, that was really, really quick, giving those different kinds of similes, and we went over a lot of them. So basically, I just want you to know that there are names for all of those different types of figurative language, and just to be on the lookout for them, and knowing that you can kind of decode them and help you create better meaning or pictures in what you are reading, and maybe even when you're writing, to make your writing a little bit more interesting. So if you can think of other examples of any of those different types of figurative language, you can email me them, give me some examples. You can tell me at our next Zoom chat, or you can write to me on Google Classroom. Any way you want to contact me, I'd love to hear other examples that you can think of. Again, I hope you're doing well, staying safe. I miss you lots, and we'll talk to you later.